Very exciting. Swati was just mentioning how excited she's about the topic of today's window seat, which is igniting personal passion while navigating turbulent times. And when this topic, the idea of this topic was coming about, Shyamala really was the right person for us to bring on to talk about this, because she's someone who has been a very accomplished corporate leader. But also, her focus is just not on that. She also is equally invested in contributing to the society. She's partnered with or collaborated and even led some of the UN initiatives in terms of gender sensitization, sustainability, addictions. She's a coach for women leaders, especially. She's a craniosacral therapist, which is something she loves to do. She's which you need to tell us what it is, Shyamala, at some point, because that's a very, very new term, especially also for me. But she's also worked with organizations, apart from Alstom, where she is the VP HR Operations and GCC Program Management. She's also worked with Unilever. She's been in the worked in the Wall Street for a while. She's been in consulting. So she's tried different things in corporate segment, but also she does a lot of work socially as well and with individuals. She's also a very committed parent of an 18-year-old. And she also takes care of her extended family, which when I hear about all of this, I'm like, wow, in 24 hours, Shyamala does a lot of things. And doing all of this, packing all of this is not ever easy. Turbulent times, I guess, is a part of all of our lives. And for somebody who manages to be in so many different spaces in life, I'm pretty sure Shyamala has faced quite a few of those. But she also talks. I've heard her speak. She's a great storyteller, by the way. She also sings beautifully. But when she talks, there's so much that comes up about so much positivity and so much looking at life in a way which harnesses the opportunities in life. I feel like having done so much, having probably faced a lot of these things, if she's able to still talk like that and inspire people, there's a lot to learn from there. So, Shyamala, we're really so happy to have you. Thank you for taking out this 1 hour and being with us. I'm not going to take a lot of time from hearing what you have to say. So I'm going to pass the mic to you. But I also see, Manoj, you have your hand up. So is there something that you want to say urgently before we hear from Shyamala? Or sorry, Manoj, we can't hear you. Okay, all right. Okay, Shyamala. So I'm going to pass the mic to you and welcome and thank you for being with us at the window seat.
Thank you, Sushmita. And that was a very interesting introduction. And you packed in a lot. So I'm sure viewers are excited to see how to manage all of this in 24 hours. And I don't know if that's a tall ask for this conversation. But I think what I would like to establish at the start of this discussion is I did receive a couple of requests from some of us who are a part of the attendees here, that I keep it simple, and especially simple in terms of language, because the language proficiency is something that mattered to our audience. So it's my commitment that I would like to connect with you and not just communicate, because all of us can communicate, very few can connect. And that will be the ethos of this conversation. And that is the note in which I would like to start. So what do I say? I think that everything that you said happened very, very organically. So started out, my early life was in Bombay. I mean, we used to call it Bombay back then, before it became Mumbai. And armed with a degree in bachelor's degree in physics, I then, so even before physics, I got into medicine at CMC Vellore. And then came the whole thing that, hey, our daughter has gotten a free seat in CMC Vellore, so she will now have to schlep from Bombay to Vellore. But then when I thought very closely about it, I felt like somehow this was not a calling. This didn't seem right at that point. And I said, okay, I'm going to ditch this medicine seat. And that required a lot of courage, because back in the 90s, engineering, medicine, or perhaps CA were the only career options. And to then say that I'm going to leave medicine and pursue physics was a big, big shocker to the system. Not just my family, but the entire extended family and friends. So I remember having a mentor with whom I had discussed, and she said that, hey, if this is your gut, have the courage to follow it through. So thereon began the journey. And there also I discovered that I have a really strong intuition, and if it will serve me well if I follow it. So then started the journey in physics. And after physics, we went on to do my master's in computer science from the University of Madras. studied in ISC for a bit, and then came calling my first job, which was a body shop. So armed with a degree in physics and computers, I started out as a Java developer and suddenly found myself from India to the bustling streets of New York. And it was very, very interesting because having been a part of the Indian education system at that time, where you're not required, I mean, you can ask questions, but you're not allowed to challenge. Challenge is not looked upon greatly. It was an opportunity to challenge everything. So from being a very quiet observer, I was taught and I learned to use the power of my voice in every meeting, challenge, not just for the sake of challenging, but after ensuring that I understood if there was something that needed deliberation, bring it up on the table. So I think that's where it started, the journey of discovering myself, if you will, and also growing my personal brand. And then came consulting, and I worked in Deloitte extensively, and thereafter with other firms in the space of alternative investments and private equity, and specifically. And then in the early 2011, 12s, my husband got a great expat opportunity. And then we were faced with this dilemma. What do we do? Do we continue in New York or move to India? I think that was the most difficult decision I'd ever made. And I chose that we would move to India because we had a daughter at five at that time, and it didn't make sense to parent her from two different continents. So came to India, and initially what happened was I was a trailing spouse, and not much of alternative investments was happening in Bangalore, or at least they didn't need the kind of expertise I had to offer. It was very nascent. So set on to do what was really my passion, volunteering, working with organizations, making a difference, because this was a God-sent break, if you will. So then we took this break, and then Ashish decided to hang his boots and follow his true calling, which was coaching. And then when he decided to do that, I decided I would want to explore the corporate India. And there came Unilever. Unilever came calling. I was first acting as their PMO director, then got a brilliant opportunity to explore the supply chain space. Then Alstom came calling. Alstom was IT first, then HR operations, and now program management of all the shared services. So if you see one thing that across the career specifically, it would be change, openness to learn, and embracing anything new and following my gut. So that's me professionally. But what defines me personally is a few things. I was raised by a very strong mom, and she was the fourth daughter of a Vedic scholar. And there were seven children. So when she had the option, and she was a brilliant student. So she had the she passed with flying colors in her 12th, and then my grandfather had the option of either getting his first daughter married or the fourth daughter educated, and no prizes for guessing what he chose, the first daughter's marriage. And then the entire family immigrated from Kerala to Bombay, and mom took on roles to support her father. She started out in American Express, a brilliant career that continued for 25 years. And one thing that I learned from her that has stood me in great stead is resources and adaptability. We all have the cards that we have been dealt with, but what sets us apart is how we are able to adapt and use those resources to our advantage. And being resourceful is a quality that she inculcated in me. And the other woman who had a great influence was my mother-in-law. So she was a professor in Nirmala College in Bombay in social work, and she was also a renowned counselor during her times. She was born with a congenital defect. So in her right hand, there are only four stubs and a small thumb. But ever since I met her when I was in my early 20s, I have never found that this woman took that disability as something that she couldn't accomplish. She does everything from cooking to sewing, which is so difficult. And one thing that I learned from her is you make the choices that you want. She could have really furthered in her career, but she chose what she wanted to balance with her family. She taught me that you can make the choices you want so long as you're okay with the outcome of those choices. And by doing that, she empowered me brilliantly, because then the victim consciousness does not set in. I have the choice, and once I make a choice, I'm okay with the outcomes of those choices. and my energies are spent in making those choices the right choices. Apart from these two women, the two other people that have really stood and have really supported me are, and again another woman if I may say so, my daughter, my 18-year-old, my strongest critic, and as well as my biggest cheerleader, never hesitates to show me the mirror. And it's nice to see the apple has not fallen too far from the tree, not just this tree, but the trees from before. And the husband, because he definitely is the wing beneath my wings. He's definitely the wind beneath my wings. If it weren't for him, I don't think I would be the person that I am. So I think it takes two to tango, and knock on wood, so far we've tangoed well. But I would be remiss if I didn't speak about this incident. So when I said I landed in the bustling streets of New York in 2000, I also witnessed the 9/11 in 2001. So I was in the second building and in the next building, and when the first plane hit, our building just shuddered. And then there was festoons, like, I mean, there was materials all over the place. We went to the window and we saw, hey, what's happening? And as we was watching, we saw the second plane come, turn, and then get into the second tower. So what I saw at that time profoundly changed my outlook on life, because you could see bodies, people jumping out. I'm sorry, I'm going to be graphic. I lost some of my close friends in the tower. And this happened in September, and I was supposed to fly back to India to get married in November. And Ashish, my fiance then, was a block away from the Pentagon. So both of us didn't know if either of us made it. And the family back home did not know there was going to be a wedding in November. But what it taught me was the impermanence of life. That fateful day, mom had called me. Back in those days, there was this amazing Yahoo Messenger with which you could chat to people back home. So when we would chat, she had called me to discuss Trousseau. Otherwise, I would have been in the train that would have landed on the path the time the towers fell down. So the happenstance of it, and what are the odds that, I mean, we all hear about death, we hear about terrorism, we hear about destruction. But what I saw that day profoundly changed everything. It taught the importance of time, it taught the importance of perspective, and it taught the importance of impermanence. And therefore, you evaluate what is important. Don't take too long in saying those I love yous, thank yous. You mean a lot to me to have those coffees. And also build things in perspective, because you can't wait for one fine day to do things that you really are passionate about or want to do. It has to be now, because you never know what the next moment holds. So in a nutshell, that has been me. So coming back to the whole medical story, even though I didn't get into medicine, there has always been a healer of sorts. And there has been an implicit, profound liking to the holistic sciences. And that's what led me to pursue craniosacral therapy. Craniosacral therapy is a very, very beautiful technique. It is essentially, see, all of us have the five senses. Now, among all the five senses, if I were to ask you, close your eyes, you'd be able to close the sense of sight. But you can't really turn off the sense of touch. And we are all born with a very sophisticated sense of touch as babies. And over a period of time, as you grow older, it becomes touch with an agenda. So when you're able to cultivate and culture the touch, then the body uses its inherent intelligence to create a circumstance or create the conditions conducive to healing. And that is what craniosacral therapy is about. Cranium is nothing but the brain, sacrum is the tailbone, and the spine connects the cranium and the sacrum. And what flows from the spine is the cerebrospinal fluid. And the entire technique is around making the body more potent and looking for health. So that in a nutshell is me, Sushmita. So before I go on and on, I would prefer that this be a very engaging conversation. So I address the questions that people have, and then we take it as it goes.
Yeah, that sounds great, Shyamala. I'm kind of in awe of all the things that you said, because in this little time, you shared so many different experiences of yours that I'm wondering, uh, the people who have inspired you as leaders, the women in your life, the experiences that have changed your perspective towards life in a large way. I feel like, this, and I've also seen you at work. So there is this, person who's also there and getting things done and all of it. So it feels like so many different dimensions to a person. I'm really in awe. So thanks for sharing all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it to questions. This time we are opening to questions a little earlier, because every time we feel like in the last 10 minutes, we can't take too many questions from the audience. And then I will come back with some questions from me. But first, maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions from the audience and then take it from there. So if anybody has a question right now for Shyamala, you can open your mic and share. Yes, Pooja, please go on.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you. And it's been inspiration listening to you. I myself can resonate with you a lot because I am a person. I have a career in the Navy. I'm a defense personnel. I retired after 10 years of service, and then I'm into corporate. And like you said, my role model is also my mother, and she is an amazing lady and taught me a lot about courage and the role I gen- generally took in my life. And then decided now this is time to do to corporate. The question I want to ask to you is, generally what happens, I can see that you are bubbling with energy and you have so many things that you are pointing energy to. How do you are able to channelize that whole energy, like 100% in different work, and be full of energy and can do justice to all of what you are aiming for?
Thank you, Pooja, and huge respect. The armed forces, yeah, have this very special connection and huge respect. Nice to meet you. So, all of us have 24 hours. That doesn't change. That is a constant. What is a variable then? The variable, as you rightly pointed out, is energy. So, how do you manage the energy is what it all boils down to. And obviously, there are techniques that I personally have and practices that I personally have in order to handle, in order to make sure that I'm in a great space energetically. But energy, if you further break down, I mean, whatever I'm saying is not going to be rocket science. You've heard it one way or the other. Is largely 4 pillars. One is obviously the food that you eat, because food can be energy giving or energy draining. Then it's obviously sleep. Sleep is very underrated and understated, and a lot of us think that sleep debt can be accumulated and one fine day or over the weekend I'll catch up, but it doesn't always work that way. Third is state of mind, and fourth, and the most important, is the first act of life as you're born is breathing in, and the world is smiling as you're crying, and the last act is breathing out. And hopefully, if we have led a good life, the world will cry. But that between this first and the last breath, how aware are we of our breathing practices? And what do we consciously do to enhance our lung capacity? Because again, I'm a practitioner of the techniques by the art of living. And that happened again coincidentally because after the 9/11, there were a lot of camps and I attended one of them. And after learning the Sudarshan Kriya, one thing that I found was my nightmares and my trauma started to recede. So that's how it got me into the whole aspect of how the breath is an important link between the mind and between our emotions and our responses. So energy is something that has to be cultivated. And in order to do and practice mindfully, what I have found is I really had to work upon discipline. Now, most of us think that discipline is stifling, but as a new mom, one of the most profound advices someone gave me is that the more disciplined you are, it'll bring you freedom and the ability to draw boundaries and to respect them. Because the moment you don't respect your boundaries, nobody else will. And the moment you are not rigorous about your own discipline, you cannot be free. For example, one getting a gym membership and letting that membership is an innate way of saying, hey, I am healthy. But is that true? No. Going to that gym and working out or not working out or working out from home is what takes the discipline. It takes the discipline 45 minutes, 30 minutes, brisk walk, whatever. But that stands us in greater stead. So my learnings have been discipline, and that brings freedom to do what I want and respecting my boundaries. So knowing when to say no, so I can say yes to the things that I truly want.
So I'm
Hope there
going
are
to
questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's really insightful. Thank you for your answer.
Thanks, Pooja. Thanks, Shyamala. I just want to, draw that thread into the corporate world, Shyamala, and ask you that as an Indian, in the Indian culture at least, saying no is such a difficult thing, right? At home, we find it difficult to say no, but still we manage somehow. But at work, also, in a lot of work that I do with people in the corporate sector, I feel like people find it so hard to say no to things or even hear a no. I mean, they would want to learn how to say no, but they necessarily don't want to hear a no. Right. So, how have you managed that at work? I mean, I'm sure you would have faced instances where you've had to say a no and it was difficult. What has been your
See, so one of the
strategy there?
things, again, and I would draw upon my experiences in Deloitte. So when I was working, I mean, this was again in my mid-20s and working in Deloitte, New York. So one of the things that the senior consultants, managers, and senior managers would do is organize a lot of these employee engagement events. And wine tasting was a big hit. And as one of the pillar members, I would organize wine tasting, but I'm a teetotaler. So it was very easy to get the sommeliers to come do their task and ensure that everybody had a great time. But then time and again, when I was asked to sip, I just had to say no. Eventually, initially, it would raise eyebrows. How is it that she's able to organize, but she doesn't drink? But consistency said that, hey, we just respect. And sometimes I also feel we are innately tempted to give reasons. No, because. But no full stop is a beautiful thing too. And it doesn't have to be aggressive. It just has to come from a space of, I don't want to do this once, twice, but eventually people get it.
Thanks, Shyamala. And from what you're saying, it also sounds like you practice it more. It becomes more easy to say no and
Yes.
say no
But
from
you
the right
have to be
space.
convinced, right? I mean, like, if we are not convinced from within, we will not be okay with it. The conflict or the duality cannot happen in the mind. You have to be convinced about where you want to draw your boundaries, what you want to say no about, and then stick to it. And sometimes it is not just easy to just say a no. There have been often times when Arya was a baby, and I would have to say, I'm going to leave office at a certain time. I'll make sure the chores are done, and I'll log back in again to make sure things are up. And you have people who respect those boundaries and support you. So, no, because is important as much as no full stop. Discerning when to say either is important and not having the conflict. Because if there is conflict within, that conflict will resonate outside. Our outer worlds are nothing but a manifestation of our inner worlds. And where does the inner world happen? That dialogue happens in the mind.
Right. The outer world. And that's one of the things that we say also, a leader's outer inner world is what manifests in their leadership in the outer world. So, yeah.
And tying back to that, another interesting aspect, and this another a friend and colleague really he just said it very casually, but it was so profound, it just stayed with me. So he said, everything doesn't have to be your monkey or your circus. So then now when I'm faced with situations, I ask myself, is this my monkey? Is it my circus? Then yes. But if it is not my circus, I don't need to get involved. Like, for example, there might be a situation when your teenager has a melodrama. The monkey is yours, but the circus is not. So you let the circus handle and play itself out. So I think that was it's a very catchy phrase, but the knowledge behind it or to imbibe it took some time and it has stayed with me. And I don't know if he's on call here, but Abhinav Sharma, you have done me huge service.
That's wonderful. And how do you extrapolate that into work? So you also have teams reporting to you and they are like your children, right? Like somebody says that leadership is like, almost like parenting in some ways or the other. So how do you differentiate the monkey and the circus when it comes to your teams?
Sometimes the monkeys are yours, but the circuses are not. But when things go bad, you have to take accountability of all your circuses, because in leadership, the way it works is the accountability for the failure is yours, and the celebration of the success is the team's. So discerning when to take accountability of that circus And being there to lead from the front is important.
That's
But then
wonderful.
when you set the home happens, it doesn't have to be your circus. There are situations beyond your own teams. Those doesn't have to be your circuses.
Do you have a story from work that you can share, which kind of, gives us a bit more depth into what you're saying? Because I think at a level, it's really easy to see what this is, but it may not be as easy to practice, right? At work, especially. So if you have something on top of your mind and if you can share with us, that'd be nice.
So while the adage was just introduced to me a year ago, I will pick an example from my previous work experiences and bring that to life. So I was leading the BCP, the Business Continuity Plan, for a leading FMCG. And that meant getting all the teams together and running and executing a seamless BCP should a real disaster occur, we are prepared. Now, I was responsible for holding the BCP plan together. I was not responsible for every function managing their continuity with their vendor partners. Initially, the perfectionist in me was all about, I need this plan, I need that plan, I need this plan. And sometimes it was difficult. It was difficult for those service lines to get it, and some of them were underprepared. But the moment the shift happened in the consciousness that I have to hold the plan together, I'm not responsible, and there are leaders who will take care of that and leave the accountability on them, the circus no longer became mine. My circus was to only execute, not ensure that every underlying plan was my accountability.
So you're almost saying that I don't need to micromanage. I can just do the, I'm relating it like that because lots of people take on responsibilities and also get involved in micro level things to make sure everything is, a certain way. But you're saying understand what you need to take on and the other things let go, let other people handle, and you be there to look at the larger. Is that?
It's also about empowering. See, sometimes the scope is rightfully yours, in which case you have to empower and ensure your second line in command will take care of it. And in most times, if you've groomed good leaders, they do. But sometimes we tend to take on scope that is not ours just because we are worried or we don't allow room for imperfection. And that's when you realize that you need to step back and that's truly not your work scope.
And when does one reach that level of clarity? Because when a lot of leaders have it and a lot of leaders don't have it, right? I don't think it's a matter of experience or expertise or age or any of that. There's something else where one comes to this clarity. And I'm wondering what that is.
See, in my every leadership journey is unique and every leadership journey is contextual. Now, at a certain point of time, if I executed a project brilliantly, that's no reason to say that 5 years down the line, the same outcomes will happen because the parameters are different. And that's why I say it's very contextual and very unique. What I have found is as a leader, one needs to be decisive and be able to spot the genius in your team, especially when they're not able to see it. Because it is about the ability to understand people's strength and helping them leverage those. And the second is decision making, because the decision is never about whether I choose good or bad. You will always choose good. The decision become difficult when I have to choose when it is between good and better or bad and worse. And especially then when the data is not comprehensive, what has served me is relying on my intuition and then putting all energies in making sure that the decision is successful. And thirdly, I would also say resilience and dichotomy. Dichotomy, especially to have a bird's eye view, but at the same time, not be shy of getting my hands dirty when needing. So some of those things have stood me in greater stead and helped me bring clarity that you asked for. But then every journey is unique and every person draws upon his or her own life experiences, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're not just this body. We are much beyond that. And I keep talking about intuition because knowledge can be gained in 3 ways. One is obviously through the senses. But now if I were to say that I'm eating gulab jamun, it is nothing but milk, dumpling, and sugar syrup with saffron, it doesn't reflect and it doesn't mean anything to you because it is a very individual taste. That is one level of knowledge, what you see and perceive through the senses. The second level is the intellect. Now, even if I put pen in a glass, in a beaker of water, the pen looks as though there is a bent in it. But is it true? No. Intellect tells us, and it discerns and it draws inferences that the pen is straight, it is just the refraction that's causing the dent. But the third is intuition. Intuition happens when there is a gut feeling that tells you, it defies logic and it just tells you, hey, this is right. And when you follow it, serves you in good stead. And for me, I rely on that extensively when the data is not comprehensive.
Right. So in a way, it's not just the intellectual capacity that way, but all your senses that you rely on as a leader, not just one aspect of your
Yes.
intelligence. Yeah. I think there's a question from Mahesh in the chat box. I'm going to read it out for you, Shyamala. Mahesh says, Shyamala, so nice to connect with you here. And I really like the lucidity in the conversation. Just curious, realizing medicine was not your calling is a perspective in hindsight. I ask this because I'm still figuring out what my calling is or would look or feel like. Any insights would be helpful.
I think if I were to see, all of us, we talk about calling. Calling is nothing but purpose, right? There is a big P and a small p. The big P is what am I on this planet for? And the small p is everything that leads to the big P. Instead of just waiting for what my calling is, and that's what I have personally done, or waiting for that epiphany to unfold, why not just live your life purposefully every moment and then collectively it ends up becoming your calling? Just food for thought, but something to ruminate over. Mahesh, thanks for asking the question.
Nice. So Shyamala, I think there is another question, but before we go there, I want to go back to the topic that if you could tell us a little more about what you meant when you said igniting personal passion in turbulent times. What does that look like? How does it connect with all of what you have just said?
I'm action oriented. And to me, that's one thing that if you ask Ashish, who knows me the best, my husband, he would say, like, she will make it happen. She will get it done. So when I talk about passion, passion is that fire, the drive, the energy that makes it happen. But at the same time, you have to be dispassionate and be able to let go. So passion is while what you bring to the table when you're acting. But that letting go is equally important. It is the other side of the coin, because without it, you'll become a mental wreck. Knowing when to be passionate about it, knowing when to let go and then drop and go to sleep. Otherwise, we'll be insomniacs, right? The mind consistently churns. And most importantly, being compassionate to people on whom we are putting on our passions to is equally important. So it's not just passion. Passion drives you through turbulent times. Passion is the action that you take. You can be a great thinker, have analysis paralysis, but unless you take that first step, nothing's going to happen. But then dropping it, being dispassionate, I've done my best. And that comes not from a space of passiveness, but from a space of activeness. That is a response. And then being compassionate to the people around and the circumstances, and most importantly to oneself, is what sails you through turbulent times. Because ultimately, we don't live in our, where do you live, Sushmita?
You mean the place? Bangalore, JP Nagar.
Yeah, but do you really live in JP Nagar? No, you live in your body and in your head.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So
well
it is the
said.
dialogues that we have with ourselves. And self-compassion is as important as having compassion towards someone else.
So if I have to just collect the few pearls that you said about turbulent times and passion, you're saying that what drives you during turbulence to take action might be your passion, but letting go of what you can't change is equally important.
Yes.
And
And discerning that, and then I have taken the action. Now let's see how it unfolds. And knowing that life only moves in the direction of positive and forward is an innate faith that I have. Sometimes it may look that what is currently happening is not great, but when you look back, it always connects. The dots always connects.
So passion and dispassion.
And compassion.
And compassion. Wow. That's something to really take away. Passion, compassion, and dispassion and compassion for yourself and for those involved in that situation. Helps you actually sail through turbulent times. I'm going to make a note of that, actually. That's very interesting to hear.
See, because we did this interesting exercise called the Strength Finders for a bunch of leaders in one of my previous organizations. And when the facilitator spoke about the strengths, he spoke about a strength called significance and how that is a driver for some of us. And for one particular colleague who was consistently berated, saying he needs limelight, everybody took a different lens after attending that session, because what motivated that individual was significance. And there was a lot of sharing as a part of that session. And when we knew what he was going through in his personal life, the need for that significance at the workplace became even more profound, because that is what kept him going. Now, what we see is just the tip of the iceberg, but when we go to what the iceberg
deeper,
actually is, you look at it from a very different and compassionate lens.
Amazing.
The judgments drop.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take some questions from the chat box and read them out to you, Shyamala. Interesting to hear your description. This is from Nitish. He says, interesting to hear your description of yourself. Curious to know how would people closest to you describe you in your personal space?
Thank you, Nitish. That's a lovely question. So, generally when I'm on sessions like these, it is never, ever possible that my spouse is a part of those. But since I see Ashish Jhaveri as one of the attendees, why not just ask the horse the question? Ashish, how do you think you will describe? Nobody is more closer, right? So I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but there goes. Are you there?
Yeah.
Please don't tell me the internet is not working.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Great.
A little louder would be better, though.
So I would describe her as someone who connects really well. Relationships are her strength. I would also say dynamism. And in our art of living, we use this word called IPOD. So inner peace, outer dynamism. Right. So inner space, you're very centered, but outward space, you're very dynamic. So there's a lot of activity going on. And I'm here with my daughter. You want to like to add something?
No.
Okay.
So I think the thing that I find the most notable about my mom is that she's very, I mean, clearly you can tell from the number of roles she's taken on, but she's very adaptable. It's something that I've told her, or is that the right word, adaptive? It's something that I've told her like almost every single time she asks me this question, and she asks it quite a lot, by the way. But yeah, I always tell her something that I really love about her is how she's very quick to adapt to a situation, no matter how exciting or difficult it might be, whether it's in a workplace environment or in a personal one, because obviously we can't really predict the future, so whatever happens just happens. And I think something that defines your character a lot is the way that you manage to, what do you say, maintain your composure while rolling with it. And I think she rolls with it in a really good way.
I should have recorded this. Sushmita, please pass this on.
I've noted all of that down, Shyamala, and I'm going to send it to you. But it was so lovely to hear from both of them. And I think, Nitish, you really got answer from the horse's mouth, in this case, from Shyamala's husband and her daughter. And thanks, both of you, for sharing that with us. So what I'm hearing is, and I'm also thinking that this is probably also what makes you this really impactful leader. So what I'm hearing is relationships are your strength. You have inner centeredness, which also comes out as outer space dynamism. You're very adaptive, and you manage to maintain a sense of composure even when rolling with it. Wow, amazing. So these actually answered a question for me, and I want you to add something if I've missed or if they have not said about your leadership. But are these the qualities that make you the effective leader that you are, Shyamala?
I've often thought about what makes me an effective leader. And I think I touched upon it when I answered the question, because the ability to be decisive and spot genius in the people around me, and resilience, and the dichotomy to have a bird's eye view, as well as being able to get into the details when I have to. And personally, I would say that discipline, boundaries are exceedingly important for me.
Yeah, so many different aspects and elements which all come together to make you this leader that you are today. Excellent. All right, I'm going to ask another question from Megha. Lovely session, so many epiphanies. One question, how can you look for mentor if someone doesn't have many role models early on?
How can you look for?
A mentor.
See, any mentoring relationship is a relationship of a safe space, if you will. Because in a mentoring relationship, if you have to self-edit, then it is not really one. So for me, the kind of people that I have sought out as mentors are the ones that I have felt absolutely okay to open up and show who I truly am, and for them to see my vulnerable self. And that's something also that I don't shy away as a leader. My team knows my vulnerable self. Mine as ones absolutely do. So I think in mentoring, first, the safe space where you don't self-edit. And then what is it that you're seeking out of the mentor? Coaching and mentoring are different. In mentoring, if you're looking at what you want to be accomplished and someone who has been there and done that, then by all means, if your thought process and your values match. But the first primary thing for me is the ability, and your vibe, the vibes will define even before you open your mouth. It has to be a space where you can be your truthful self, and both of the parties are vested in bringing out the best version of yourself. I hope that answers it, Megha.
Extremely well, Shyamala. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megha, for that question. The next question is from Aarti. Aarti says, hello, Shyamala. It's always great to meet and listen to you. Thank you for the session. I'd request your input on transitioning from one role to another, as you yourself have taken up different challenging roles. Were you ever scared or worried, and how did you overcome that?
See, fear of uncertainty is a natural thing. But then we need fears in our life, and again, the credit goes to Ashish, because there was one version of me before and after, and it's become even more stronger with Arya, because she really pushes my button and makes sure that I do exactly the things that I'm fearful about. Fear is needed, but it is needed. It's needed just like a pinch of salt in food. You won't add a spoon of salt, right? You just add as much salt that is needed. Fear is needed, so you are on your guard. But if you're so fearful, then you will not grow, because it will keep holding you back. And if you look at it from the Indian chakra system, the chakra of the heart center is where both there is love, hatred, and fear. So what I would suggest more from a corporate angle is, if you've decided to move on, yes, there is fear, but then draw strength from all those situations in the past when you've had fear and you've successfully surmounted them. Surround yourself with people who will be your champions. And third, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and learn, because one can never underestimate the power of learning when you take on a new role. And have the vulnerability to accept that no matter, I mean, this is what happened to me. I was VP HR operations suddenly, and I had a team that were HR experts much beyond, and I took on a reverse mentor. I need to learn this, and coming from a space of this is what I can offer, and this is what I need to learn from you, enables that growth very harmoniously. But fear cannot be a stopper, my dear. Take it by the horns. And I say that to Arya because, I mean, I grew up being afraid of dogs because I was bitten by one. And this child has managed to make sure that I pet every dog that's going around.
Thanks, Shyamala. There's a question from Kaveri Amma. And Kaveri Amma says, hello, Shyamala. I really like your flow of thought. In your experience, what are the most effective strategies for developing resilience in a professional setting? And how can individuals consistently apply them during challenging times?
The answer also lies in your questions. Consistency. Consistency is a very, very important theme in resiliency, because being persistent and staying the course and knowing that challenges are not here to last. Everything will change, right? I mean, if you look at a sinusoidal curve, there is a up and a down, there is an ebb and a trough. So knowing to stay the course and know that nothing shakes is very important in resilience. And I feel that the more self-care practices one does, it helps build that inner strength that serves during resilience, whatever those may be. Some of us like to journal, some of us like to read, some of us like to work out, some of us like faith plays an important component. Whatever it is that you draw your strength from, just make sure you continue that and being consistent about it. Because what is resilience ultimately? It's about staying the course against all odds. And if we look at each of our own lives, odds have not stayed throughout, right? There have been times, and we know health because there have been times of illness. We know happiness because there have been times of sadness. So it is not necessary. It's the two sides of the same coin, if you will. It's complementary.
And I'm going to also ask you, Shyamala, connected to that, vulnerability and resilience. For me, they kind of go together. But there's also this whole, like you earlier said, that my team knows the vulnerable me, right? That's not something that most leaders are comfortable with. They don't want to, and maybe it's changing in today's scenario, but still a lot of mind shifts have to happen around that, where as a leader, you don't want to show your vulnerability for two reasons. One, because you don't want to seem weak. For the other, because you don't want to pass on the stress to your team, right? But how do you balance that? And and for you, is vulnerability something that makes you more resilient, or being vulnerable and accepting your vulnerability? Or is it something different for you?
See, I think accepting my vulnerability makes me more human in any situation. It's not that I have the answers to everything. It is not that I will be able to solve every problem on my own, but together we'll find a way. Because when we are too perfect, it also creates an unnecessary burden on the team that they all have to be perfect. So there needs to be a little bit of humaneness in the whole aspect, obviously keeping the larger goal in mind, and depending upon the situation, what you choose to show to the team would also differ. But our vulnerabilities are also our greatest strengths. And I don't remember this quote from Rumi, but he said that the light shines from the place where there is a wound or something like that.
Yeah, exactly that actually.
Yeah,
The light comes in through the cracks or something like that. Yeah, it means like that.
So we may not be perfect, we may not have all the answers. There are temporary setbacks, but together because the moment you do that, you accept. Otherwise, until there is acceptance, you will not be able to bounce back. You will not be able to plan a course of action and stay the course of action. So it's really important to accept the situation. And the vulnerabilities could be individual, it could be collective. And then once you have them, it becomes very easy to then put a work plan, action plan around them and surmount them.
So it is an idea that may not necessarily be true, that if you are vulnerable and if you allow your team to be vulnerable, then your team is not a strong enough team. That's a myth, or that's an idea that's not
I
necessarily
have
true.
always found that a myth. Personally speaking, I have always found that a myth. If we collectively are not able to see our own flaws, then are we calling the naked emperor as an emperor with dresses? I don't know. Like I have my APAC HRO head who's recently joined, and some of my most profound discussions are with him, where we openly discuss vulnerabilities and what we need to do in order to ensure that we fence the ring properly. Now, both of us said everything is hunky-dory. We wouldn't be calling a spade, right? And calling a spade is not just about looking at others and doing it. One must have the innate courage to look at your own self and call a spade a spade. I don't know if Tapnesh is here, but yeah, it's been very, very insightful discussions with him.
And do you think a mentor or a coach that you've had earlier on before becoming, or coming to a much senior leadership role, that has helped you become or explore your vulnerability and gain strength from it, like find those safe spaces? Because one of the reasons people fear being vulnerable is because they don't have that safe space to be vulnerable as well. So how did you develop that courage as a leader?
Again, I think, yes, I've had mentors, I've had coaches. And as I told Megha, it takes two to tango, and you will know that this person is safe and this is a safe space for me to express. There will also be times when what you thought was a safe space may not have been a safe space, but it's up to you to play to your strengths. Even a vulnerability can be turned around and be made into your strength, right?
Absolutely.
Having mentors are important, and I think that having that, surrounding yourself with the right kind of people who can be your champions when you're not there, who can be your nasty friends to point out the mistakes that you do, who can be stepstones on whose shoulders you grow and from whose life you draw lessons as you continue your own career, are extremely important in personal life and professional life.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to ask the audience if they have one more question before we go into the rapid fire. We are going to close soon. So if anybody has a question for Shyamala, please feel free to ask now.
Can I? Uh, yeah, thank you. So wonderful, Shyamala. Thank you so much. It takes a lot to share the personal experiences, that too with, I say we're all strangers who just met virtually in few minutes. So thank you for bringing your authentic you to this session. It takes a lot of courage. I think that's one of the live experience which we all faced here. I'm more interested to know about the touch therapy, which I don't recollect the name, but if you can just quickly share some, knowledge or around it, it would be great.
Yeah, so I spoke about craniosacral therapy, and so as I said, touch is the most sophisticated sense that we are born with. And then as we grow, what happens is it becomes relegated to the back, and then it becomes intentional touch. Now, you will agree with me when I say that our body has innate intelligence to heal itself. Not when you are really at the fag end of something, but early on. And then it is also very fair to say that before any illness manifests in your physical body, it was already there in a psychosomatic form in your causal body, in your subtle environment. And most of the illnesses that we currently face in this generation, be it PCOD or hypertension, is all because it's psychosomatic in nature, in addition to the environmental factors. Now, what craniosacral therapy does is it is totally based on touch. It's about relearning the language that we already know and we are born with, but have forgotten. So it's a very non-invasive, holistic therapy where the practitioner holds different parts of the body, specifically along the cranium and the sacrum, and enables health in the body. And where I have particularly found it useful is migraines, irritable bowel syndrome. I have found it extremely useful for women who are on a maternity path or are new moms. And it is just amazing to see how, when you create conditions that are conducive for the body to heal, the body adapts. And as we become more skilled and cultivate the culture of touch, I mean, as a practitioner, and we listen to the body talks, and the communication with the body to support movement to health and manifest internal changes in a positive manner grows extremely high. We all think blood is the most important fluid, but then you also have the CSF, the cerebrospinal fluid, which is not spoken about a lot, but aids, and it is produced in the third ventricle of the brain. So there is, in fact, most of us would have known that there is like a blood in the brain is not great. It is aneurysm. It's a stroke. So there is a barrier where the blood doesn't flow up. And the brain is completely nourished by the CSF. And whoever we are, at the end of the day, the CPU for this human body is the brain and the spinal cord. And it promotes its health.
This is totally a new thing which we have learned today. Thank you so much for clearing.
Thank you, Swati, for that question. I'm going to take one more question because I just see one hand up, which is Rimsha. Go ahead, Rimsha.
Thank you, Sushmita. Thank you, Shyamala. I think an amazing session. So I want to understand about assertive communication or being more assertive in life. So I took a test, a leadership test very, recently, and I knew it all along, but now, with the result, it's absolutely in my face that I'm not assertive. I need to work on my assertiveness. Where can I start? And what tips can you, if you could help with some things or practical ideas?
Thank you, Rimshan. This is a very beautiful question that you ask. And I'm going to take a step back and first say that no leadership journey is a cut and paste template. Every leadership journey is unique. And I say it is unique because each of us are unique. There'll be certain things that I would be absolutely comfortable doing that you may not be, and vice versa. And there may be strengths that you have. And what I have always found is it helps to play to one's strengths. It's easier to teach a bird to fly higher than to swim.
Hmm.
So identify
Yes.
what are your strengths, play to your strengths. Assertive communication is often mistook for aggressive communication. You don't have to yell and scream in order to assertively communicate. Even in the same vocal variety and tone, you can assertively communicate so long as you're just able to say, what is it that you want? One example that I can give you is start with a no. Ask yourself, how many no's am I saying? How many boundaries am I drawing? And if you find that you aren't drawing boundaries, be it your personal space or professional space, start from that. Second, it's about communicating the message succinctly. And there are two ways in which we all communicate, right? One is what is the difference between a reaction and a response? Now, if I were to just yell at a 2-year-old child and say, come back later, what will the child do? He will run away saying that, hey, you yelled at me. My message is with myself, with me, and the emotion has passed through. Now, if I tell the same child, go draw 5 paintings and then come back, the message is gone. He's happy drawing his 5 paintings and then coming back. Now, what's important to note here is if a child of 2 is able to discern, most of us deal with adults. So it's important to communicate in your manner where the message goes across and the emotion stays with you. And more often than not, when women talk and they get involved in a discussion, the pitch increases. When the pitch increases, what happens? The ears around automatically shut. Nobody's listening. The best way is to drop your voice when you want to make a point feel heard. Ask yourself if you're doing that.
Wow.
Those are 3 tips.
Thank you so much. I am not doing that. So yes, totally. Thank you.
Thanks, Rimsha. Thanks for that question. We just have a minute to go, but the one quick last question I want to ask you, Shyamala, is what's one thing that you think every leader should do and one thing that no leader should be doing?
Again, I would speak from a very, very personal perspective because, as I said, journeys and leadership are personal and contextual. But one mantra that has personally guided me is taking accountability for failures and recognizing the team for success. One. And secondly, I would always, always choose influence over authority.
Excellent. I think those were simple but so profound. It is, and one last, so is that your closing line, or is there something you want to leave us with as we close?
You said that I'm a storyteller.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I didn't touch upon it. And it's important that people understand why storytelling is important. See, we all have data that is available everywhere in a raw format. And then when it is organized, it becomes information. You draw some patterns, trends, and that will give you insights. But only when augment with a strong narrative that connects, it becomes a compelling story based on which decisions get taken. And then it is backed by a strong action plan. So I have learned to respect the power of storytelling. And one thing that I would like to leave all of us with it. What is the story that you would like to leave behind?
Amazing. That's the question you want us to take with us, yeah?
Because for each of us, it is going to be unique. It'll be a personal story, it'll be a professional story. So fast forward to 20, 30, 40 years. What is the story you would like to leave behind?
Lovely, lovely, profound question. Thank you so much, Shyamala. This was such an amazingly deep session. I'm just amazed at again. So this comes back to you as a person who does so many different things, but in 1 hour, you also could touch upon so many different things that are so coherent and comes together to show how you have reached where you are and how you managed to do all of these things so deeply with connectedness and with great success. Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerabilities, your stories with us. Really, really amazing to hear and learn from you. Thank you, Shyamala.
Thanks for the opportunity. And
Thank
thanks to
you.
everybody who took the time out. My pleasure and my privilege.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for being
you.
here. Thank
Thank
you.
you so